I think just as the world has come together to help provide resources, they'll understand that Ukraine, to have a future and to feed the world, is going to need help, and that's our responsibility.
Across the front line here in Ukraine, Russia's spring offensive is well underway, but in the meantime, the future of the Trump-backed peace talk process seems to truly be hanging in the balance at the moment as plans are being put on the table, discussed at the highest level. Trump has met with Zelensky at the Vatican, but at the same time has openly expressed that the US might withdraw from the process completely. Amid all this, the Kyiv Independent has had the chance to speak to one of the strongest pro-Ukraine voices inside of the Republican Party, Nebraska State Senator and U.S. Army veteran Tom Brewer. We spoke with the senator here in Kramatorsk, Donetsk Oblast, just about 20 kilometers away from the front line, on his 5th trip to Ukraine during the full-scale war, trying to deepen U.S.-Ukrainian ties from military to agricultural sectors. Can you tell me, what are your impressions? What is the purpose of this trip, and how does it feel at this point, 3 years in?
Well, to start with, the changes are significant. Of course, our first trip, things were chaotic. The war had only been going for a couple of months. No one really understood exactly where the battle lines were. No one exactly knew how to prepare with the different weapon systems, because they hadn't started to come yet. And now things have, I guess what you'd say, normalized a little, in that there's established lines, there's a flow of weapon systems, and units are better equipped. But it's also maybe a feeling of some war fatigue. You know, the ones that have been in the middle of this fight for this time, there's no way you can be a part of that experience that long and not have a tiredness, a fatigue from just having to do that without having breaks. And so, you know, that part, you wish there was some way that they would have a rest at some point, but as long as the Russian front is where it is, you know, you must fight on.
I can't not talk about this, I guess. The last few months for people in Ukraine watching the developments on the world arena, and for pro-Ukrainian voices like your own inside the US, the last few months have been a bit of a roller coaster, a bit exhausting. What has been your view of how these things have developed since President Trump's inauguration?
Well, unfortunately, our system has not been necessarily kind to the effects that it's had on the Ukraine, because we change governments every 4 years, or if a different party is elected, and with the new government comes new faces. And with that comes people that may not understand things as well as they should. They sometimes don't understand the history, the culture, the people, the war. And so they make decisions maybe without fully understanding the consequences of them. And I think maybe it takes a while for them to fit into their jobs, to everybody to understand what right looks like. And we're kind of in that period right now. Now, I think there's some good things happening. And I think that the reality of what Russia is doing and how horrible they have, how they've been with their rockets and hypersonic missiles and the things that they've just indiscriminately shot into your capital and most of the large cities. People understand that now. They understand the price that the Ukrainians have had to pay. And because of that, the support is there. But I think if you were in America right now, you'd understand that you can change administrations that are in the White House or personnel in Congress, but the support from the people of the United States to Ukraine hasn't changed. You know, the ones that supported and loved the Ukraine before, they love you now. And so we're just trying to make sure they understand what's happening here, because if no one comes and tells the story of what's happening here, no one knows, and the only thing they hear is Russian propaganda.
Yeah, well, about that, there was, of course, pretty much unilateral support, bipartisan and within the Republican Party for Ukraine at the start of the full-scale invasion. Then things got a little bit more difficult with the aid package that was held up. And now, of course, we see a bit of a different direction. What does that kind of battle look like inside the Republican Party at the moment, and where could it go from here?
Unfortunately, there are some that are, changing their position on Ukraine. They came from maybe more extremist side of things. But those that are from where I'm from, in Nebraska, they continue to support Ukraine just as now as later. And I think if you were to take a head count of the 535, the vast majority would support Ukraine. I really believe that. Now, will they be able to remodel a new budget that's similar to the old one? I don't know. That's going to depend on money that's available, and I think they're watching to see what's happening here. And if they feel positive that it looks like that you're able to fight the good fight and have success, then I think that helps a lot when you're attempting to get more resources.
And I guess physical support, resources, money is one thing, but when it comes to that clarity and that understanding, I think it was just over a month ago that the U.S. and Ukraine agreed to a unilateral ceasefire, and Secretary of State Rubio said that the ball was now in Russia's court, but since then the road has still been quite rocky. Do you think that majority of the party and its leader now as well are coming around to this understanding that Russia isn't actually interested in stopping?
I think they are. I mean, there's been comments recently, and I've shared information back. I was in Kyiv several nights ago when the big attack happened there, and I think that woke up everyone to see the truth, because if you don't understand how Russia has behaved in the past, it's hard to understand that their word is of little value in what their actions are going to actually correlate to. And I don't think there's any special love for Russia, because since the Second World War, that's been the enemy that we have prepared to fight in Europe. It's just that they sometimes are better at propaganda, at telling a story that's not true. But if you tell it in enough places and you put it on social media, there's enough people that only look at that and don't think, and then that becomes reality.
What do you think are the core messages that need to be brought over to really combat these Russian discourses?
Well, first off, we kind of have an obligation to educate folks on what's happening here. And that's hard, because when the war first started, everywhere you looked, there was a journalist that would have a camera and tell a story, and people become enlightened to what was happening, and almost daily they would follow things, all the way up to the loss of the steel plant at Mariupol and all of these kind of things. But what's happened since then is they've all gone to other stories and other places for the most part. If you could have them follow and understand what is happening here on a constant basis, so they get a feel for what is happening day in and day out, I think there would be more support, because to many it's a faraway situation and it's hard for them to want to embrace or understand it because it's so far away. And that's kind of, I think, part of my job is to go back and to help tell that story. So we go around, whether it be on Capitol Hill or whether it be to invitations from different towns and different states to come and do a presentation and talk to them about what we've seen and what we experienced. And I'm hoping that the news of what's happening here is a more complete picture of the truth.
This trip, as with all the other work of the Kyiv Independent, is only made possible by our community of members. So to join us as we navigate through this crazy year, click the link in the description below. Thank you. And when we talk about what you learn from these trips and how you see the battlefield developing, What's your answer to people who say that, we can't handle Ukraine and the Middle East and China all at once? We need to focus on one or the other.
Well, I've been fairly blunt because, I fought in a number of wars and wore the uniform of the United States for a long time. And I have seen us go to places, sacrifice our blood, our treasure, and when we want to walk the streets of the towns of those countries, we can't. In the Ukraine, we have given some treasure. The Americans have not given blood in this fight. And it does not matter what town I pick to go to, people are grateful. People come up and thank you and appreciate the fact that we've been there to help them. Those are the countries we should be with. Those are the countries we should be embracing. Instead, we go to countries that truly hate us, and yet we fight a war, we sacrifice our personnel and our treasure, and then walk away. Afghanistan's a perfect example. I think this is where we need to be because the very future of the world could be determined by the events that happened here in Ukraine.
Speaking about the Ukrainian people, you mentioned how on an individual level they're often grateful, and there's, through most of the full-scale war, there's been a very positive view of the U.S. But now, obviously, that has been affected by recent events, and at this point, some Ukrainians are starting to feel this abandonment almost.
Yes.
Potentially in the future going forward. What's your message to Ukrainians and how they should understand what's going on in the U.S.?
Well, first, I was a little bit worried when I came over that there would be resistance and anger, and I have not seen it. They have been kind. They will make comments. They will say, what about this and why is this? But it's not out of anger. It's out of confusion. I think that if they could understand that we're going through a process of redoing the government right now, changing a lot. And it will settle down and it'll become normal. And I think the need to make sure that Europe and Ukraine and the situation here with NATO is stabilized is essential. It's just a part that we have to face is not just a European issue. It is a world issue because you've got North Koreans, you've got Chinese, you've got Iranians, you've got all of these players, the ones that are truly hating the United States, that are helping Russia. There should be no doubt in someone's mind what side we should be on in this fight and who we should be helping. But sometimes you have to wake people up to that because they get too caught up in the Russian propaganda.
Just to finish up, looking to the future and a future after this full-scale war, which I think we all hope will be over soon. Obviously, the Americans have been pushing forward the minerals deal, which has been pretty controversial in its different versions in Ukraine, sometimes named exploitative. What's your vision for what that future relationship would look like, whether it's minerals or other sectors?
Part of the reason we're here is to look at the post-ceasefire or post-war situation, the reconstruction. And specifically, because we're from Nebraska, we're looking at the agricultural piece of this. And how can we help them demine? How can we help them take the land and reset so that it's usable again? Because you have a country that was truly the breadbasket of Europe, but also North Africa, Central Asia, all these other places. We have the ability in Nebraska to provide irrigation, grain bins, seed corn, all of these things that will be a part of that. But we have to understand how we do it and how much is needed. And so part of our mission is to look post-war. How do we get Ukraine back on its feet? How do we get their economy back? And our piece of it, of course, is the ag piece, but that will be a big piece of it. And I think the United States is going to need to divide up its abilities with different states and different resources to then be here to build them back again, because it's going to be a difficult period when the war is over to figure out how to take all the destruction from the war and turn it into an economy that can stand up and survive.
I guess the question, though, is how to, whether it's agriculture or minerals, how to reassure the Ukrainians, first of all, that it's not just handing over all of these resources for the future generations, but also that Ukraine can expect to receive in return real long-term backing security-wise?
Well, I think it's going to take an effort by the EU, the United States. I mean, there will be a lot of players. But if you look at other places we've been, even when we were in places like Afghanistan, Japan and other places were huge players in helping to build border crossings, to evaluate, the vehicles coming in and going out, or how they can rebuild roads and things like that. I think the world is going to have to come together, but it's going to take, an orchestrated effort, probably by the EU will be the most obvious choice because they're going to understand the most needs, and they're going to have to just put the resources in to do it. And there will be some, difficult discussions, and they'll have to figure out what part is most important and what is the level of improvements we can do and how fast we can do them. But I think just as the world has come together to help provide resources, they'll understand that Ukraine, to have a future and to feed the world, is going to need help, and that's our responsibility.